this is Ryan Neal, Benton County Extension Agent and blueberry grower. A few weeks ago I spoke with you about weed control in the blueberry field, and today I'm going to go over some numbers that you can share with growers that are interested in starting a small farm around 5 acres or so. These are all figures I gleaned from my own operation. I put in about an acre of blueberries in 2012, and since then I've increased by roughly an acre every 2 years, and this year planted that last block in the upper left-hand corner of the field to total about 5 acres. This is a 7-acre field, and the rest of it is used for parking. I've averaged my cost to establish an acre of blueberries to be about $13,000. You can see here where the lion's share of the cost is in the plants. I figure plants are going to be about $5 a piece once I pay for out-of-state shipping. This is for a virus-tested, container-grown plant that stands about 15 to 18 inches tall. Other than plants, the big cost for me has been drip line. I've used 2 lines per bed, which of course doubles your cost over just one line, but I do like having them both, even though I just use one at a time for watering and fertilizing. The next cost is landscape fabric, which I use as opposed to plastic mulch or wood mulch, but I do like using it, and I think is cheap over the life of the fabric and is easy to put out and plant into. Other costs include pre-plant fertilizer according to soil tests, sulfur if you need to lower your pH, and sawdust or pine bark or peat moss to raise the organic matter of the soil pre-plant. Operational costs that recur on a yearly basis include irrigation water, fertilizer, and chemicals. This is not meant to be a complete breakdown of costs, but rather to demonstrate the economies of scale as one goes from 1 acre to 3 acres. It only costs a little more to maintain the planting, from $10,000 for just 1 acre per year to just over $5,000 per acre per year when you have 3 acres. A couple things to note are I do most of the work myself, so my labor costs are relatively low, with the exception of paid help for pruning and some picking. I'm also on city water, which is relatively expensive compared to ground or surface water. I didn't include capital expenses on the previous graph because a lot of folks putting in small plantings of blueberries may already have some equipment or can at least rent or borrow equipment because a lot of it will only be used every once in a while. Some of the equipment I've used is listed here, but aside from the shed, sprayer, driveway, and sulfuric acid pump, I already had the rest of it on the farm, or I could rent or borrow it. I hated to include numbers because much of the stuff could cost as much or as little as you're willing to spend. Do note that if you are maintaining a grass middle, it's important to have a mower that you don't mind running because much of what folks are going to be spending their time on is going to be mowing. I did want to include in this presentation my personal experience with yield. Mostly what you will see for yield figures on ground not normally planted in blueberries is going to be around a gallon or 5 pounds per plant per year. I've only picked berries for 6 years, but I have documented that yield. You'll see I've only averaged just over a half a gallon per plant. A couple things to note regarding this average is that I am mostly a pick-your-own farm, so lots of berries end up in folks' mouths or on the ground. You can also note that as the number of plants harvested increases, I am always harvesting plants that have just been in the ground for 3 or 4 years, so that is always bringing down the average. This average may increase over time, but I just wanted new growers to be realistic about yield, especially as they try and pencil out income, and especially on ground that's not normally planted in blueberries. Thank you for watching, and as a county agent, I'm always happy to talk with folks interested in putting in small fruit. And here's my contact information. If anybody wants to reach out, email address is rneal@uaex.edu. Thanks again.
This is Bill Cline with North Carolina State University, In this session, we'll cover some economic considerations for blueberry production in the southeastern United States. We'll talk some about geographic location, the importance of a market window. We'll also review a 100-acre budget model, and finally some discussion on pick your own and direct marketing. Geographic location plays a big role in determining where blueberries can be grown commercially in North Carolina. There are 100 counties in the state, but only 6 have large commercial blueberry acreage, and most of the acreage in North Carolina is in a single county, Bladen. This concentration of the North Carolina industry in Bladen and surrounding counties is due to the unique low pH, sand-based organic soils found in that region. In other areas of the state, soils have to be modified extensively before blueberries can be grown successfully. Native blueberry soils provide an economic advantage for growers establishing new fields. In other states and other regions, it's quite expensive to start blueberries when organic matter has to be added prior to planting. Native blueberry soils in North Carolina include Leon, Lynn Haven, and Merville fine sands. Also, some peat soils classified as muck soils. Using North Carolina as our example, we can see that blueberry harvest timing in a given area may extend as much as 11 to 12 weeks from early cultivars to the latest. For a given production region, the fresh price declines over time, so volume tends to be stacked early in the season. Using North Carolina again as an example, in this table we see the top blue line, weeks 1 through 11 of the season. This would be May, June, and July in North Carolina. And the price per pound falling from $2.46 in the first week to a low of $1.38 in the 8th week. So the price declines quite rapidly after the first month of the season. And if you look at the bottom line in the table, the percent of the total crop, really try to have most of the crop coming off in May when the prices are high. The leading states for blueberry production in the U.S. include Michigan, Florida, California, New Jersey, Georgia, North Carolina, Oregon, and Washington. In the next slide, we'll discuss the economic advantages that allow these 8 states to predominate. Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, and to some extent Georgia have native blueberry soils that will grow blueberries successfully without extensive modification. These are some of the earliest states to begin commercial blueberry production. In the 1980s, Florida became a major blueberry producing state with the introduction of low-chill cultivars from the University of Florida. Florida is the first to market and receives the highest returns per pound. California has also adopted the early southern highbush cultivars, and they are very early to market as well. Many areas of California have a dry climate, and this economic advantage allows for organic production. Washington State, in particular Eastern Washington, has a dry climate that is suitable for organic production. Also in Western Washington, just tremendous yields there. So that's another advantage for the Pacific Northwest, both in Western Washington and also in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. Now I'd like to focus in on commercial wholesale production in the southeastern United States. And for our guide, we'll use the blueberry budget developed by Dr. Charles Safley, myself, and Mike Mainland at North Carolina State University. This budget was produced in 2005 and based primarily on data from North Carolina. We should mention there are a number of changes that have occurred since this budget was written. Labor costs are up significantly, as are equipment costs. There are also some additional pieces of equipment that are not in this budget that a grower here in 2019 would want to purchase, in particular a soft sorter for the packing line. We've seen the addition of more pre-cooling in the packing area, so the buildings have gotten more expensive. Also, in the past years, increased regulation, so the Good Agricultural Practices, Food Safety Modernization Act, and the requirement for third-party audits have all increased the regulatory burden on growers. To offset this, I think we've seen improved cultivars that have higher yields. We've seen an increase in machine harvesting for the fresh market, and have also seen an increase in farm size, where growers are taking advantage of the economy of scale to spread the costs. The budget we will discuss is based on a 100-acre model. Production practices or best management practices recommended by extension specialists and growers. The equipment costs were based on 2004 prices, and input on other prices, chemical prices for instance, were collected from farmers and also from dealers who supply blueberry growers. Our yield assumptions were based on the soil type and what yield we might expect from a given soil. So what we classified as a good soil was a site that with irrigation would produce 8,000 pounds of blueberries per acre in peak years, years 7 to 9, with irrigation, and without irrigation would still produce 5,000 pounds per acre. What we considered a marginal soil was a soil that at best would produce 6,000 pounds per acre, even with irrigation in peak years, and with no irrigation, significantly reduced yield at 3,000 pounds per acre. Yield assumptions included a fresh market cost to pick and pack berries of $8.29 per flat. For hand-harvested fruit, $5.67 per flat for machine harvested. We also assumed that 80% would be fresh and 20% would either be processed or lost, with processed fruit machine harvested at 39 cents per pound. Assumptions on harvest returns were that the season lasted for 11 weeks, that fresh blueberries averaged around $14 a flat, and processed berries were sold for 60 cents per pound. Costs were broken down into establishment cost, annual cost of production, and equipment investments, as we see here in this table, the equipment required in the first year. So the equipment investment is broken out by the year in which the equipment or facility is needed. Establishment costs were dominated by land clearing, and where irrigation was considered installed by the cost of the pond, well, and the irrigation infrastructure and pumps. Equipment needs in the second year were minimal, but we did add an air blast sprayer and some farm trailers in the second year. In the third year, our equipment investment included a truck, mower. This is an articulated flail mower for mowing the tops of bushes, a second flail mower for chopping up prunings in the row middles, a metal building or pack shed, and a minimal packing line because by the third year you're starting to harvest and handle fruit. In the fourth year, we invested in a self-propelled harvester. In the sixth year, a second packing line, and also a color sorter. Color sorting is critical for machine harvest for fresh, to remove the green fruit from machine harvested berries. Our estimated annual cost of production were compiled for the 8th year when the bushes would be in full production. The columns in this table show the cost for good soil, a good soil with no irrigation, and a marginal soil with irrigation. Pruning, weed control, disease and insect control, irrigation and land rental are the same across all columns, but harvest costs fluctuate with volume of fruit. And if we calculate receipts based on our projected yields, subtract all our costs, then at the bottom row you see the total net return for each scenario. This table shows the flow of funds on a good blueberry soil years 1 through 9 with and without irrigation. You can see in year 1 there's a big upfront cost to the irrigation system compared to non-irrigated. But if you look at the following years, say 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the increased returns with irrigation become readily apparent. If we look at the flow of funds for marginal soil, again, the irrigation is a big upfront cost, but in this instance, the irrigation is even more important in terms of increasing returns. Up to this point, we've considered the flow of funds within the business model, but now we'll take a look at the accumulated cash flow. This is an important change because it shows us when the break-even point is, or when the year is that you actually start making money. So this break-even year, the year when enough revenue has been generated to cover your startup expenses, is a really important milestone. If you have a farm loan that's of shorter duration than the break-even year, this would leave the farming operation insolvent. So if we graph the accumulated cash flows for a site with good blueberry soil, what you see here is thousands of dollars on the vertical axis and the years 1 through 20 on the horizontal axis. And you can see that the red line there, the break-even year for irrigated blueberries, is around year 7 or 8. Break-even year for non-irrigated is a year or so later, year 8 to 9. And the accumulated cash flow for irrigated blueberries is much higher than for non-irrigated. Next, we'll take a look at the accumulated cash flows for the marginal soil. And in this instance, the break-even year is pushed out even farther. For marginal soils with irrigation, the farm can be profitable. But without irrigation, the cash flow never breaks even for the marginal soil. So the enterprise never makes money without irrigation on this marginal site. So the conclusions we can draw from this 100-acre model is that a new 100-acre blueberry planting on good soil can be profitable. On marginal soil without irrigation, it's a losing venture. And on a marginal soil with irrigation, it's a risky venture. Our conclusion was that irrigation for frost protection and for soil moisture pays handsomely. I'd like to turn our attention now to budgets for small plantings. There are lots of blueberry budgets out there for large-scale plantings, but none that really fit our needs for small-scale growers. Small-scale growers have needs that vary widely among locations, such as the cost and availability of soil amendments, and the wholesale prices are too low to support small farms. So the business model that seems to work best for small plantings is to cut out the middleman or do your own marketing, direct marketing, to increase the returns to the grower. This gets you more money, but you also have to be your own marketer. If we take a look at wholesale versus direct marketed, you can see the difference here. The U.S. wholesale average price is $1.43 per pound. That was 2018. That works out to $7.86 a gallon. Some of the pick your own prices I've been able to glean from growers this past year, up to $20 a gallon or $3.63 per pound. And for ready pick, it's even higher, up to $30 a gallon, which would be $5.45 per pound. So small growers, by marketing directly, can realize these retail level prices. Some of the per acre establishment costs that I would expect to incur on a small planting on an upland site that needed to be amended with mulch would include cultivation and bedding, sulfur, fertilizer. First big expense would be pine bark mulch to amend the site at 100 cubic yards per acre. That's around $1,600. The next big item, drip irrigation lines and labor to install. I budgeted for 2 lines per row, pressure compensated with built-in emitters, and that came out to around $3,000. plants at $2.50 a piece, around $2,700, and planting labor based on the $12.23 H2A labor rate. So we're getting pretty close to $8,000 per acre establishment costs, not including the cost of the well or filtration system. So to summarize thoughts on small plantings and budgets, most of the budgets estimate blueberry establishment costs at between $8,000 and $9,000 per acre. And regardless of the source, most of the budgets I have seen show net returns of $3,500 to $4,000 per acre. Where given, the break-even points are very similar to our 100-acre model, the 7 to 8 years out. And in all cases, irrigation greatly affects the long-term profitability of the planting. So strongly encourage the use of irrigation. Good luck with your blueberry budget. Thank you for your attention. I hope this information was useful.